I was never someone who believed in fate or premonitions. Life was simple, predictable. I had a routine, a job that paid the bills, and a small circle of friends. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happened to me. That changed the night I met a stranger who knew my full name before I even introduced myself. It was late, nearly midnight. I had just finished dinner at a small diner near my apartment. The place was quiet with only a few customers scattered at the tables. I paid my bill, put on my jacket, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The streets were empty apart from the occasional passing car. As I walked toward home, I felt a strange unease creeping in, the kind you get when you feel someone watching you. I glanced over my shoulder, but the sidewalk behind me was empty. Shaking it off as paranoia, I kept walking. A few blocks later, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost just ahead of me. He was dressed in dark clothes, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. His face was obscured by the dim streetlights, but I could tell he was watching me. I slowed my pace, unsure whether to cross the street or keep going. Before I could decide, he stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. "You are walking home later than usual tonight." I froze. The way he spoke felt too familiar, like he had been following my routine for days. My first instinct was to brush it off as a coincidence. Maybe he had mistaken me for someone else. "Sorry, do I know you?" He smiled, a small knowing smirk that made my stomach turn. "We have never met before, but I know you very well." Something about the way he said it sent a chill through me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Without another word, he extended his hand, offering it to me. I hesitated, but took it, my fingers trembling slightly. Unfolding the paper, I felt my breath catch in my throat. Written in neat, almost mechanical handwriting was my full name. My real name. Not the shortened version I used with friends. Not the one listed on my social media profiles. The full name I had not spoken aloud in years. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. But how would a total stranger know this? How did he know my schedule, the exact route I took home? I looked up at him, my mouth dry. "Who are you?" His smile widened just slightly, as if he had been waiting for that question. "I am just someone who has been waiting for you." I felt my legs tense, ready to run, but something kept me rooted in place. There was something unnatural about him, something inhuman, in the way he stood, too still, too composed. I crumpled the paper in my hand, forcing my voice to stay steady. "How do you know my name?" His eyes darkened, the amusement in his expression fading. "You should not ask questions you do not want the answers to." A sharp gust of wind rushed past us, breaking the eerie silence. The street suddenly felt emptier, darker. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to take a step back. "I am leaving." I turned on my heel, walking quickly away, but I could feel his presence still there just behind me. My heart pounded, my breath coming in short gasps. I did not dare look back. When I reached my building, I rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, my pulse racing. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to calm down. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing, maybe I was just overreacting. But when I stepped into my apartment and flipped on the light, my blood ran cold. Sitting on my kitchen table was another folded piece of paper identical to the one the stranger had given me. I walked forward slowly, my hands shaking as I picked it up and unfolded it. There were only 4 words this time. "See you very soon." A noise behind me made my stomach drop. The quiet creak of a door opening. I turned around, but my apartment was empty. Then my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You left your door unlocked again." I felt the air leave my lungs as I turned toward my front door. It was wide open. I stood frozen in place, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I was sure I had locked the door when I came in. I always did. My hands clenched into fists as I tried to steady my breathing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out, but I forced myself to move slowly, cautiously stepping toward the open door. The hallway outside was empty. The dim overhead lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows. I listened for any sound, any hint that someone had been inside, but there was nothing. Just the distant hum of the city outside. I closed the door, locking it twice this time, before grabbing my phone with shaky hands. I stared at the unknown number, my thumb hovering over the call button. But what was I supposed to say? That some stranger had given me a note with my full name, appeared to know everything about me, and now my front door was open on its own? It sounded insane. I took a deep breath and typed back a message instead. "Who are you?" Almost instantly, 3 dots appeared on the screen. My pulse pounded as I watched them blink, waiting for a response. Then the message appeared. "You already know." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. "What do you want?" This time, the response took longer. My stomach twisted as I waited. "You invited me in." I stared at the words, my heart hammering against my ribs. What the hell did that mean? I never invited anyone in. My phone buzzed again. "It is too late to run." I turned slowly, feeling my skin prickle with cold. My apartment was silent, but suddenly it felt different. The air was heavier, thicker. I stepped backward toward the kitchen, grabbing the biggest knife I could find. My breaths came in short, uneven gasps. Then my lights flickered. The television turned on by itself, filling the room with a loud burst of static. The screen flashed between black and white noise before a new message appeared in bold letters. "I am here." The screen went black. I spun around, gripping the knife tighter, my back pressed against the counter. My apartment was still empty. No movement, no shadows. But I felt something. I wasn't alone. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the room. The hairs on my arms stood on end as an overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. My body screamed for me to leave, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, in the reflection of the dark TV screen, I saw it. A figure, standing in the corner of my living room, not moving, just watching. A cold chill crawled down my spine as I forced myself to turn around. There was nothing there. I let out a shaky breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. My vision blurred slightly as panic set in. Then my phone vibrated in my hand. "Turn around." I nearly dropped the knife. My stomach twisted into a tight knot as I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly that I thought I might collapse. But somehow, I managed to force my body to move. I turned. Nothing. The apartment was silent again, the energy shifting. It was like whatever had been here was gone. But I knew better. This wasn't over. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but here. I practically ran down the hallway, not stopping until I was out on the street. The cold night air stung my skin, but I barely noticed. I pulled out my phone again, my hands still shaking. "I am not going back." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The reply came immediately. "You will." I swallowed hard, looking up at my apartment window. The light in my bedroom was on. I never left it on. My breath caught in my throat as I stared up at my apartment window. The bedroom light flickered once, then went dark. My body refused to move, my brain trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but deep down I knew. Someone or something was inside. I wanted to run, to disappear into the city and never come back, but my legs stayed frozen in place. My phone buzzed again. "Come home." I clenched my jaw, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone tighter. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. Whatever was in my apartment wasn't human. I knew that now. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned away, forcing myself to keep walking. I needed to think. I needed to figure out who, or what, was doing this to me. I stopped at a late-night diner a few blocks away, my nerves still raw as I slid into a booth near the window. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. A waitress came over, her face tired but kind. "What can I get you?" I opened my mouth to answer but hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That I needed answers, not food? That something was following me? "Just coffee," I muttered, my voice hoarse. She nodded and walked away. I drummed my fingers against the table, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone, debating if I should call someone, but who would believe me? Even I barely believed what was happening. Then another message. "You think you're safe?" I stiffened, my stomach twisting into knots. Another message followed. "Look outside." Dread crawled up my spine. I didn't want to look. I knew what I would see. But my hands moved on their own, gripping the edge of the table as I slowly turned my head toward the diner's window. A man stood across the street. Not moving, not blinking, just staring. He wore a black suit, perfectly pressed, his hands clasped neatly in front of him. His face was pale, expressionless. But the worst part, the part that made my blood run cold, was that I recognized him. It was me. Or at least it looked like me. Same build, same posture, same face. But the eyes were wrong. They were too dark, too empty. And they were locked onto me. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs, my vision blurring at the edges. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. My phone buzzed again. "Come outside." I shot up from the booth, knocking my coffee over as I stumbled backward. The waitress turned, startled, but I didn't say anything. I didn't care. I needed to get out of here. I bolted toward the back exit. I never thought I would be the kind of person to look for a new identity, but desperation can push you to places you never imagined. It started with a mistake, one that spiraled out of control until the only way out seemed to be vanishing entirely. I had always lived a quiet, unremarkable life. A stable job, a modest apartment, and no real excitement. But one bad decision, just one, put me on a path I couldn't escape. I got tangled up with the wrong people, and suddenly, my name was attached to something I had nothing to do with. It was a slow realization. The missed calls from unknown numbers. The unmarked envelopes showing up in my mailbox, each one containing less than subtle warnings. The first time I saw someone following me, I told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I knew I wasn't. I tried going to the police. That was a mistake. The officer at the desk looked me up in the system, and something shifted in his expression. He kept glancing at the screen, his fingers twitching on his keyboard. Then he looked at me and said, "Stay here for a moment." I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I walked out as calmly as I could, but as soon as I turned the corner, I ran. By the time I got back to my apartment, I knew what I had to do. I needed to disappear. The problem was, disappearing isn't as easy as it sounds. You can't just walk away from your life without a plan. You need a new name, a new background, a way to live without leaving a trace. That's how I ended up on the dark web. I had always heard about the kinds of services you could find there: fake passports, stolen credit card numbers, hitmen for hire. I never took any of it seriously. Until now. After hours of searching, I found what I was looking for. A forum thread titled "New Life, No Questions Asked." The seller had hundreds of satisfied customers. People claiming they had walked away from their old lives and started over. The process seemed simple. 1. Choose a new identity. 2. Transfer the payment. 3. Receive everything you need to vanish. It sounded too easy, but I didn't have a choice. I picked a name from the list, Daniel Carter. It felt strange choosing a new identity like I was picking an outfit, but I had no time to hesitate. I followed the instructions, sending the required cryptocurrency to an anonymous wallet. Within minutes, I got a message. Payment received. Your new identity will be delivered soon. Stay where you are. That last part made me uneasy. Stay where I am. How would they know where to send it? I figured it was some kind of automated response, so I tried not to think about it. Hours passed. Then, sometime after midnight, there was a knock at my door. I froze. No one knew where I lived. At least, no one should have. Slowly, I approached the peephole, expecting to see an empty hallway. But someone was standing there. A man in a dark suit, motionless, facing my door. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Another knock. Louder this time. I backed away, heart pounding. My phone buzzed. A new message. Open the door. I stared at the screen. This is what you wanted, isn't it? The knocking stopped. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Slowly, I crept back to the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, right outside my door, was an envelope. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a driver's license, a passport, and a new set of credit cards, all with the name Daniel Carter. They had delivered exactly what I asked for, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. I stared at the documents in my hands. The passport looked real. The credit cards had my new name embossed on them, and the ID had a photo of me, one I had never taken. That was the first red flag. Someone had made this before I even sent my payment. A chill ran through me, but I pushed it down. I had what I needed. All I had to do was pack a bag and get the hell out of here. I shoved the documents into my backpack and turned on my laptop to book a one-way flight. My hands were shaking as I typed. The sooner I left, the better. That's when I noticed something strange. My cursor started moving on its own. I sat frozen, watching as my browser closed and a blank document opened. One by one, letters appeared on the screen. You are now Daniel Carter. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. This was bad. Someone was inside my system. Watching. Controlling. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You should leave now. I grabbed my backpack and bolted. The airport was crowded. I kept my head down, trying to blend in. I had used one of the new credit cards to buy a ticket under my new identity. No red flags. No questions. But I couldn't shake the paranoia. I kept seeing the same man. Black suit, clean-shaven, standing near the check-in counters. I saw him again near security, then at my gate. He wasn't looking at me, but he wasn't not looking at me either. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just nerves. But when I boarded the plane and took my seat, my stomach dropped. He was there, 2 rows behind me. I barely remember the flight. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. When we landed, I waited until most of the passengers had left before grabbing my bag. The man was gone. Maybe he was never following me in the first place. Maybe I was just losing it. I got into a cab, giving them the name of a cheap motel far from the airport. The driver barely spoke, which was fine by me. As we drove, I checked my phone. Another message. "Welcome home, Daniel." I stared at the screen. No sender. No number. Just those 3 words. The cab turned a corner, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a black car parked outside my motel, waiting. I told myself not to go inside, but what else could I do? I had no backup plan. No contacts. No one who knew where I was. I paid the driver and stepped out slowly, scanning the area. The car was empty. No one in sight. I walked past it, trying to act normal, then slipped into my motel room and locked the door. The room was small, barely more than a bed and a desk. I set my backpack down and turned on the lamp. That's when I saw it. An envelope, sitting on the bed. I hadn't been here before. No one should have known I was coming. I picked it up with trembling hands and slid my finger under the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper. There is no going back. I dropped the note and backed away. That's when the TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, flickering black and white. Then just for a moment, an image flashed across the screen. It was my apartment door, taken from the hallway, taken from the peephole. Someone had been watching me. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my back against the wall, watching the door, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but I knew deep down that I wasn't safe. The next morning, I decided to leave the city. I needed to disappear again. I threw everything into my bag and headed for the bus station. I paid in cash this time. No trace. I was about to board when I felt it, someone watching me. I turned slowly. The man in the black suit stood across the terminal. No expression, no movement, just staring. The bus driver called for passengers to board. I forced myself to move, stepping onto the bus, my heart racing. I sat near the back, gripping my backpack like a lifeline. The door shut. The bus pulled away. For a moment, I thought I was free. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. "You can run, Daniel, but you can't hide." I gripped my phone so hard my fingers ached. The message stared back at me, pulsing in my mind like a warning I couldn't ignore. I scanned the other passengers. A woman with headphones, a man snoring against the window, a teenage kid scrolling on his phone. No one seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That somewhere, someone was watching. I turned my phone off and shoved it deep into my pocket. Maybe if I stopped reacting, they'd stop chasing. Maybe if I stopped playing the game, they'd forget about me. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a game. The bus ride stretched on for hours. The further we got from the city, the more the unease in my chest settled. Maybe I'd finally lost them. By the time we pulled into a quiet little town, the sun was dipping below the horizon. It looked like the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked. I stepped off the bus, breathing in the cold air. New town. New start. I walked to a nearby diner, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, and used the time to plan my next move. First, I needed a place to stay. Second, I needed to ditch my phone. I reached for my pocket and froze. My phone wasn't there. My stomach twisted as I searched my bag, my jacket, my seat. Nothing. I must have dropped it on the bus. I turned toward the window, my breath catching in my throat. The bus was still there, the driver finishing up a call before heading inside for a break. I grabbed my bag and ran. The doors were still open when I climbed back on. The inside was dark, empty. The air smelled like old leather and diesel fuel. I moved down the aisle, checking the seat I'd been in. Nothing. My pulse pounded. Maybe someone had taken it. A creak sounded from the back of the bus. I turned. There, resting neatly on the last seat, was my phone. Face up. Screen glowing. A message waiting. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped forward. My footsteps sounded too loud in the empty bus. I picked up the phone with shaking fingers and turned the screen toward me. "Don't get off this bus." The doors slammed shut. The engine rumbled to life. and the bus started moving. I spun toward the front. The driver's seat was empty. The wheel moved on its own, turning down a road that wasn't on the map. I ran forward and grabbed at the wheel, but it wouldn't budge. The dashboard was dark, the speedometer stuck at 0. Outside, the landscape changed. The town was gone. We weren't on a normal road anymore. The trees were too tall. The sky was too dark. And then I saw them. Figures standing on the side of the road, watching as the bus passed. All dressed in black. All staring with empty expressions. Somehow, I knew they were waiting for me. I ran to the back of the bus, trying to pry open the emergency exit, but it wouldn't budge. The windows wouldn't break. The bus kept driving. Faster now. Straight toward a tunnel that hadn't been there a second ago. The road ahead was swallowed in blackness, a void so deep that my reflection disappeared from the glass. My phone vibrated again. A final message. You asked for a new identity. The tunnel swallowed the bus whole. The world outside vanished, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was standing on a quiet street. My bag was slung over my shoulder. My clothes were clean. The bus was gone. The town was gone. I looked around, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't where I had been before. I pulled out my phone, and my hands turned cold. It was a different model. Newer. My fingerprint unlocked it instantly. I opened the contacts. Empty. No familiar names. I checked my ID. Daniel Carter. My new face stared back at me. A face I didn't recognize. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. All I know is that I asked for a new identity. And now I have one. But I think it cost me more than I ever realized. Because no matter how hard I try, I can't remember my old name. I can't remember who I used to be. And worst of all, I don't think I was the only one on that bus. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the ID in my trembling hands. The name, Daniel Carter, felt foreign, hollow. Like it didn't belong to me. Like I was a stranger wearing someone else's skin. The street was empty. No bus, no driver, no signs of where I had come from. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. I checked my phone again. No messages. No call history. No photos. Nothing. I swallowed hard and tried to think. The last thing I remembered was the tunnel, the void swallowing the bus whole. And then, waking up here. I needed help. I needed answers. I spotted a convenience store on the corner and walked inside, hoping to find something, anything, that would jog my memory. The cashier, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, barely looked up as I stepped inside. I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum, just to have an excuse to talk. As he rang up my purchase, I cleared my throat. Hey, weird question. What town is this? The cashier frowned, giving me a strange look. You okay, buddy? I forced a weak smile. Yeah, just long trip. Got turned around. He sighed and leaned on the counter. You're in Riverside, man. Not exactly a place you forget. Riverside. The name sparked nothing. It was like hearing a random word for the first time. I nodded, playing it off. Right. Thanks. I paid and walked out, but the second I stepped back onto the sidewalk, my phone vibrated. A single notification flashed across the screen. Unknown number. Welcome home, Daniel. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath coming faster. My instincts screamed at me to run, but where? I had no memory of this place. No idea what to do. Then I saw them. Across the street, standing just past the glow of a flickering street lamp. 3 figures, dressed in black, watching. Their faces were obscured by the shadows, but I could feel their eyes on me. I turned away, heart racing, forcing myself to act normal. If they were watching me, maybe I could slip away before they. A voice spoke behind me. Too close. You shouldn't be here. I spun around, fists clenched. But there was no one there. The street was empty. The figures across the road were gone. But my phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. Run. I didn't hesitate. I bolted, feet pounding against the pavement, breath coming in sharp gasps. I didn't know where I was going, but every instinct told me to move. Streetlights flickered as I passed. Windows in nearby buildings seemed to watch me. The world around me felt unreal. I turned a corner, sprinting into an alley, trying to catch my breath, and slammed into someone. A man, dressed in a black suit. No expression, no reaction, just watching. I staggered back, heart hammering, but before I could speak, he raised a hand. Stop running, Daniel. My mouth went dry. I don't know who you are, I stammered. I don't even know who I am." The man sighed. "That's the point." Then he reached into his coat pocket, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in a hotel room. I didn't remember checking in. I didn't remember falling asleep. I sat up, my head spinning, my pulse pounding in my ears. The room was modern, clean, too perfect, like it had been staged. On the nightstand, a single envelope waited. I hesitated, then picked it up, pulling out the letter inside. The message was typed just like before. "Your request has been processed. There is no going back." Beneath it was a plain ticket with my name, Daniel Carter, printed in crisp, clear letters. A destination I didn't recognize. A new life waiting. I swallowed hard, staring at the paper, my mind racing. Who had done this? Why had I asked for this? And then it hit me. I couldn't remember. Not just my old name. Not just my past. I couldn't remember why I had wanted to disappear in the first place. Something had been taken from me, and I had no idea how to get it back. Was this the life I had chosen? Or was it chosen for me? I guess I'll never know. All I know is that if you ever find yourself on the dark web, thinking about buying a new identity, don't. Because some things are meant to be forgotten. And once you lose yourself, you might never find your way back. I never believed in fate. I never thought the future could be written down long before it happened. But last night, I found something that changed everything. A letter buried deep in the dark web, a letter that described my life in perfect detail and ended with something I am not ready to face. It started with boredom. I was scrolling through forums looking for obscure internet mysteries when I found a post titled "Lost Time Capsule Archive." It had no upvotes, no replies, just a single link. Curiosity got the best of me, and I clicked. The page that loaded was ancient-looking, simple white text on a black background. At the top it said "The past remembers." Below was a search bar and a message: enter a name and discover their forgotten words. I assumed it was a database of old letters or diary entries, some kind of archive of lost messages. I hesitated, then on a whim, I typed my own name. A single result appeared, a file titled "To be opened in the year 2025. The date sent was exactly 100 years ago. My stomach tightened. It had to be a coincidence, a common name, or some random text generator. But when I clicked to open the file, the letter inside was addressed directly to me. My full name written in perfect handwriting. I swallowed hard and read. "To the one who finds this letter, your steps have already been taken, your choices already made you believe you have found me. But I have been waiting for you. I know who you are. I know what you fear. I know what is coming." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The writing was old-fashioned, the ink slightly faded, but the details it mentioned were disturbingly accurate. My hometown, my childhood, the scar on my left hand from a fall. When I was 8, it was impossible. I had never spoken about that accident online. No one could have written this, not unless they knew me personally. I kept reading. "You are searching for answers, but some things are better left hidden. You will try to run, but you will not escape. Soon you will see the sign. When you do, you must decide, do you want to know the truth?" My hands trembled as I scrolled down. The letter was dated exactly 100 years before tonight, the timestamp matching to the minute. I checked the site's code, trying to find a clue, some indication that this was a hoax. But there was nothing, no metadata, no source, nothing but the words on the screen. And then my lights flickered. My heart pounded. I turned away from the screen, forcing a nervous laugh. Power surges. Happen. It was nothing more than a coincidence. But then my phone vibrated. I picked it up, and my breath caught in my throat. A new text from an unknown number. "Do you want to know the truth?" I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. I hadn't told anyone about the letter. I hadn't posted about it anywhere, but someone or something knew. The air in my apartment felt heavier, a pressure building in my chest. I turned back to my laptop. The letter was still there, but at the bottom new words had appeared. "Look outside." My pulse pounded in my ears. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. I walked to the window, hesitating, before pulling back the curtain. A man stood across the street, perfectly still, his face hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving, wasn't even shifting his weight, just standing there staring at my building. I let the curtain fall back into place, stepping away from the window. My phone vibrated again, another message. "You are not alone." A wave of cold dread washed over me. I ran back to my laptop, trying to close the site, but the screen flickered, the text distorting for a second before reforming. "It's too late now." The lights in my apartment flickered again, this time staying off for several seconds before humming back to life. I grabbed my keys and phone and rushed out of my apartment. I needed to get out, needed to be around people. As I stepped onto the street, my eyes darted to where the man had been standing. He was gone. I forced myself to take deep breaths. I was overreacting. I told myself this was just an elaborate trick, some kind of prank. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew better. I walked to the nearest coffee shop, sitting in the brightest corner with my back to the wall, my hands still shaking. I unlocked my phone. Another message was waiting. "You shouldn't have looked." I turned my phone off, shoved it into my pocket, and ran my fingers through my hair, trying to steady myself. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. Someone had written that letter 100 years ago, and they had known I would find it. They had known everything about me, and now they were watching. And worst of all, I still didn't know how the letter ended. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that this was just some elaborate hoax, but as I sat in that coffee shop, heart pounding, I realized something chilling. The letter was still open on my laptop back home. I had left in such a hurry I hadn't shut it down, and I had no idea what else it might say. I debated going back, but my gut told me that was a bad idea. Instead, I pulled out my phone against my better judgment and turned it back on. The screen flickered before settling into normalcy. No new messages, nothing waiting for me. Maybe I had imagined that last one. Maybe it was just panic setting in. I had to know. I opened a private browser and went back to the site, but when I tried to reload the letter, the page was blank. No text, no timestamp, just an empty white screen. I refreshed, nothing. I typed my name again, nothing. It was like it had never existed. I sat back, gripping the edges of the table, my mind racing. If this was a prank, it was an incredibly sophisticated one, but something deep in my bones told me it wasn't that simple. My thoughts were interrupted when I felt a shift in the air. Someone had just entered the coffee shop. The bell on the door jingled softly. I kept my eyes down, not wanting to meet anyone's gaze, but then I heard it. A chair scraping across the floor directly across from me. Slowly I looked up. A man sat there, a man I had never seen before, wearing an old-fashioned suit. Something about it seemed just slightly off, the fabric too stiff, the cut just a little wrong, as if he had stepped out of a different time. His face was emotionless, his hands resting on the table between us. He stared at me unblinking, and then he slid something across the table, a folded piece of paper. My throat went dry. I didn't want to take it, but I also couldn't refuse. My fingers trembled as I reached out, hesitating, before finally unfolding the note. 3 words. "You were warned." I looked up, but the man was already gone, the chair still rocking slightly from where he had been sitting. I stood quickly, glancing around, but no one else in the coffee shop seemed to have noticed him. I grabbed my things and rushed outside, scanning the streets, but there was no sign of him. I was breathing too fast, my mind unable to process what had just happened. The letter had disappeared from the website, but now here it was right in front of me, a physical piece of evidence. I unfolded it again, this time noticing something I hadn't before. More writing. At the bottom in smaller script was another line. "Your final warning is in your apartment." My stomach dropped. I knew I shouldn't go back, but I had no choice. By the time I reached my building, the sun had set, and the air had turned cold. The hallway felt longer than usual, my apartment door somehow heavier as I pushed it open. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. The kind of silence that feels too deliberate, as if the space itself is holding its breath. Then I saw it. Another letter resting neatly on my kitchen counter. But this one was already open. My pulse thundered in my ears as I approached, hesitating before picking it up. The paper felt old, fragile, like it had been sitting there for decades waiting for me. The handwriting was the same as before, but the words were different. This time there was no warning. There was only a date. Tomorrow. My hands clenched around the paper, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. But I knew one thing. It had already been decided. I stood frozen in my kitchen, staring at the letter, my mind racing. Tomorrow, tomorrow what? The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the air too thick to breathe. I turned the letter over, hoping for more, but the back was blank, just aged yellow paper, as fragile as my sanity in that moment. I needed to leave, get out of my apartment, get away from whatever this was, but as I turned toward the door, something stopped me. A sound. Not loud, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakable. Paper crinkling. I whipped around, my heart hammering, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. The letter on the counter had moved slightly, like it had been brushed by an unseen hand. No, I wasn't waiting to see what happened next. I grabbed my keys and phone, bolted for the door, and didn't stop running until I was several blocks away, standing breathless beneath a flickering streetlight. I checked my phone again, half expecting another message, another warning, but there was nothing, just silence. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into the nearest hotel, locked the door, and sat awake, watching the clock hands creep toward midnight, waiting for tomorrow. Morning came, but nothing happened. No strange messages, no shadowy figures watching me, just an ordinary day like every other before it. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it had been a mistake, a prank, my own paranoia getting the best of me. Then I turned on the news. The anchor was reporting on a car accident just a few blocks from my apartment, a collision that had happened right in front of my building at the exact time I would have been walking home last night if I hadn't left. The image on the screen showed the wreckage, twisted metal glass shattered across the pavement. It was a miracle, the reporter said, that anyone had survived. Except no one had. I shut off the TV, my hands shaking. I knew then that the letter had been right. Tomorrow had come, and I wasn't supposed to be here to see it. I don't know who sent it, I don't know how they knew, but I do know one thing. I should have never found that letter, and I will never go back to the dark web again.
I wasn't looking for anything specific when I found it. Just another night spent aimlessly clicking through dark web marketplaces, searching for the bizarre and unexplained. I had always been fascinated by the strange corners of the internet, the hidden places where reality blurred into something else. That's when I saw the listing. No title, no description, just an Imago worn, leather-bound book with a symbol carved into the cover, a spiral looping endlessly inward. The seller's name was simply Caretaker, and the only text in the description was a warning. Do not read aloud. Do not read after midnight. Do not let it read itself. It was obviously a gimmick, some cryptic horror movie nonsense meant to drive up the price, and yet I couldn't look away. There was something about that book, something wrong. Before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked purchase. It arrived 3 days later, wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. The book itself was heavier than I expected, the leather cracked with age. It smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. When I flipped through the pages, I saw they were filled with dense, handwritten text. No punctuation, no paragraph breaks, just a continuous stream of words in an unfamiliar language. That first night, I sat at my desk, running my fingers over the strange script. The ink had a faded, reddish tint, like it had been written long ago with something that wasn't meant for writing. I tried searching for translations, but nothing matched. It wasn't Latin, Greek, or any ancient language I could find. That should have been my first warning. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, the wind slipping through my window, but then I saw it. The book was open. The pages were turning by themselves. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The whispering grew louder, like dozens of voices speaking at once, overlapping, muttering words I couldn't understand. My eyes locked onto the ink, and for a split second I swore I saw the letters shifting, rearranging themselves. I slammed the book shut. The whispering stopped. I barely slept after that. Every night I placed the book on a shelf, far from my bed, but without fail I'd wake to find it open again. Sometimes just a few pages turned, sometimes flipped all the way to the back. The whispering never lasted long, just enough to jolt me awake, to remind me that it was still there. On the 7th night, I made a mistake. I whispered along. I don't know why I did it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, maybe something else. But as the whispers filled the room, my lips moved of their own accord, forming sounds I had never heard before. The moment the last syllable left my mouth, the room went silent. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. No number, just a message. You have been heard. I threw the book into a locked box that night, shoved it into the closet, and tried to pretend it wasn't there. But the messages kept coming. Every night, the same thing. You have been heard. Keep reading. Finish it. The worst part wasn't the messages. It was waking up to find the book back on my desk, open to the last page. And the last page was empty. I stopped sleeping. I stopped answering my phone. The walls of my apartment felt too close, the air too thick. Something was waiting. Then, the final message came. The book is not finished. You are. That night, I heard the whispering again. Louder this time. No longer just words, laughter, footsteps, the creak of my closet door opening. I stayed in bed, frozen, my eyes shut tight. But I knew the book was open, and I knew something was reading me. I wanted to run, to get out of my apartment, leave the book behind, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But my body wouldn't move. My limbs felt heavy, as if something was pressing down on me, pinning me to the mattress. The whispering grew clearer. It wasn't coming from the book anymore. It was coming from behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to turn my head just slightly, just enough to see the corner of my room. The closet door was open now, just a crack, but I knew it had been closed when I went to bed. Something was standing there. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A figure, tall, thin, barely visible in the darkness, but the outline was unmistakable. It didn't move, it just stood there, watching. The whispers continued, not from the book, not from the figure, but from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, inside my own head. I screwed my eyes shut. And then, a breath. Not mine. Right next to my ear. I bolted upright, gasping, my body finally able to move. The room was empty. The closet was closed. The book was nowhere in sight. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I felt it. The weight in my hands. The book. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember reaching for it. But there it was, the leather cool against my palms, the pages open. And the last page was no longer blank. There was something written there now. One word. Continue. I threw the book across the room and ran. I didn't stop to pack, didn't stop to think. I just grabbed my car keys and left, driving through the empty streets until I was far from my apartment, from the book, from whatever was inside it. I checked into a motel an hour away, didn't turn on the lights, didn't turn on my phone, just sat on the bed, staring at the door, trying to convince myself that I was safe. Then the knock came. Soft, 3 times. I held my breath, listening. Another knock. Then something slid under the door. A single piece of paper. I didn't want to pick it up. I already knew what it would say. I picked it up anyway. You cannot run from a story that is still being written. I left that night, crossed the state line, deleted my accounts, changed my number, found a new place, a new name. For months, nothing happened. No messages, no whispering, no book. Then, last night, I came home to find something waiting on my doorstep. A package. No return address. Wrapped in plain brown paper. It was heavier than I remembered. My hands shook as I picked up the package. The weight of it was unmistakable. I already knew what was inside. I wanted to throw it away, burn it. Leave it there and never look back. But something inside me, something I couldn't explain, made me carry it inside. I placed it on the table, staring at it, willing myself not to open it. Then my phone buzzed. A message. Finish it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those words. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, my breath shallow. I knew what it wanted. I knew that the book wasn't done with me. Slowly, I peeled away the paper. The leather cover was the same. The spiral symbol, deep and dark, seemed more pronounced, like it had been burned into the skin of the book itself. I traced it with my fingertips, feeling something pulse beneath the surface, like a heartbeat. I shouldn't have opened it. The pages flipped on their own, stopping at the last one. It was still writing itself. Letter by letter, words appeared on the paper, ink sinking into the page like something alive. My name was the first thing I saw, then my location, then the final sentence. The story ends when you do. I slammed the book shut, but I already knew the truth. I was never meant to read it. It was meant to read me. I stared at the book, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to believe it was over, that closing it would somehow break whatever had started the moment I brought it into my life. But D, the wispy. Some nights, I wake up to find the book on my nightstand, even though I know I locked it away. Some nights, I hear soft pages turning in the darkness. And some nights, I see a shadow standing just beyond the edge. Maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe I let fear take over. Or maybe the story isn't over yet. Was this tale real, or just another dark web mystery? Let me know in the comments. If you love chilling stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. But remember, some stories aren't meant to stay unfinished.